The world is full of interesting people with wisdom and extraordinary experiences to learn from. Join me on a journey to discover them, speak with them, and learn from them. I'm Adrian Sinclair, host of A Podcast with Interesting People at apodcast.com. Welcome, friends, to A Podcast with Interesting People. Today, Taylor Proctor, founder of happinessabound.com, a wonderful person that we're going to talk to about happiness. She's a transformational happiness expert.
Yes.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Expert feels like a very lofty term, but I am a certified mentor as well. So
Fantastic. So we're going to be talking about happiness. We're going to be talking about your podcast that you've been doing since 2017, I understand.
Yes.
And, you know, I just started with podcasting and doing all of this, so I might have some questions for you on that account as well. But I'm really, really interested about how did you get into, you know, the happiness, I don't know, business?
Happiness space.
Happiness space.
Yeah. It's a riveting tale. I was actually a really, really angry person. And
this is going to be good.
Yeah.
This is going to be good.
And I had several incidences that really reflected that anger. And my husband, who actually knew me back in high school as well, he would say to me often, "Where did you go?" Because I was so angry and I was just a victim all the time. And it's funny, we had a phrase in the household, hell hath no fury like Taylor, mildly inconvenienced.
Wow.
Like, not anything crazy, but if I was just mildly inconvenienced, I would just lose it. It was a temper all the time. The red hair stands, right? And I just was so angry. And every time that I would try to fix that anger, for instance, my husband saying, "Hey, where'd you go?" And I'd be like, "I don't know. I used to be so happy and carefree, and then life happened, like it happens to all of us." And I would try to fix it, and then something would happen and it would set me off again, and I just had this habit. And when I would see other people and unfortunately compare, I would see everyone else was so happy and seemed go lucky and free. And here I was in this like teeter-totter of rage and anger, and then the downside of that being this overwhelming sadness and truly feeling like I was broken because I couldn't break through the anger, and everyone else seemed so put together and not rage monsters that I felt like I was defective. I felt like I was broken and there was something wrong with me, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And that only was exasperated on the fact that I would then hear stories of other people, and they would have gone through these terrible hardship things. And I was like, I just had a normal life and I was this way. And they'd gone through all these terrible things, and then they would share their story and there'd be like this light for them. And I was so wrapped up in it, I couldn't even see the light at the end of the tunnel. And that didn't help me because I felt like I was hearing people's finished story instead of their journey through it. And so I felt like I was even more broken. So it was this teeter-totter of vulnerability and sadness and not wanting to feel this way. So every little thing would set me off to anger, because anger is a lot easier and socially acceptable to deal with. And it wasn't until I realized that I could either keep on living this teeter-totter life, which quite frankly is between two very miserable sides, or I could get off the teeter-totter and just take any little action and any little progress. So I started down that path, really trying to change my mindset. And funny enough, it started with giving people grace while driving.
not going ballistic when someone cuts you off.
Exactly. And trying to give people, when they're driving like jerks, the benefit of the doubt. And I started to make up and tell these stories to myself about these individuals who cut me off or didn't use their signal. Because keep in mind, as a rage monster, you're a victim. Everybody's out to get you.
That's not how you. That's how you feel, right?
Yeah.
How dare you do this to me?
Exactly. This entitlement piece. And so if you look at driving, specifically in Utah, which is where we're at now, Utah drivers.
You should try New Jersey.
Oh, I have heard that is pretty rough. But there's this sense of entitlement, and when I would drive, I would encompass that, put that with the rage, and I would just lose it. And there was several situations that happened, like road rage incidents, not crazy, but crazy enough to scare me, that I started to make those decisions to change the narrative in my head and give those drivers or whatever the benefit of the doubt.
But what was, can you take me back to that singular moment where you decided to do that, to actually,
I wish there was a singular.
Was it spontaneous?
I wish I could point out to just one thing. I think it was a culmination of a lot of little things, and eventually made that decision. Because there's several facets of this story, but I can share one of my incidences that really was not great. If the person that this happened with ever sees this, they'll know it was me, and I apologize. I'm a nicer person now. But I was going to a craft store. I'm not much of a crafter, but I was going for something. And it was like holiday-esque season, so several years ago, and there was a front row parking spot. Like, you know how it is, like front row parking spot. And what it was the store was here, there was the aisles here, and then actually there was a main one, and it wrapped around, like a main road that wrapped around. And this parking spot was closest to the store, closest to the wraparound. That's a main-ish road. It's one of the complexes.
Right.
Person's pulling out. I'm like, great. I have my signal on. I'm indicating. It's important. I'm indicating that this is my spot, and the person backs out and goes, and before I can move forward, it's like from the movies.
Yeah,
An SUV comes in and pulls into the spot. Now again, hell hath no fury, like me, mildly inconvenienced. Looking back at it, I go, it's a parking spot. Not that big of a deal, right? I lose it. I'm blaring on my horn. I'm screaming in my car to myself, but you can see, and ashamed to say it, flipping them off. Like, I lost it. And they stay in their car. Well,
probably afraid of for their life now.
Yeah, probably. And I can be pretty scary. And so I go up and around. Now keep in mind, it goes like this. And that's the only way to get back really into the parking spots without going completely the other direction. And I'm angry, so I'm not going to go the other direction. I'm going to lean into the fight, not run away. And so I pull up around so then I can see their windows and everything else. And same thing. I'm blaring on my horn. I'm flipping them off. I'm having trouble. Oh, my watch. I'm screaming at them, and they're just staying in the car. So I go wrap around, and I take a very far away parking spot. Looking back, that's totally fine, acceptable. And I start walking to the store. They don't even get out of their car. They back out of the spot now that they see I have parked, and they start driving towards me.
Oh, wow.
They roll down their window. And now, angry side of me, I actually don't drink soda, but I've never wished more for a big gulp 7-Up, because I would have thrown it in that open window.
Oh, gosh.
Like, that's how angry I was.
You might have not be here if you would have done that, because who knows where that would escalate to.
Oh, exactly. Well, and it further escalated because they rolled down their windows, they walked past me, or they drove past me, and I was walking past them. And keep in mind, it's like an Escalade. It's a great big SUV. And hope you're happy now. And they said that to me and drove. So I'm like, there's a spot I was indicating for, lost my mind over. They didn't even get out and go to the store. Like, they took it purely to take it. Then they kind of antagonized, like,
oh, wow.
poked me a little bit as I'm walking to the store. Now, this was all anger and rage. That was just habitual reaction.
Yes.
When I got into the store, I'm looking at, I can't even tell you what I was looking at on one of the shelves. Everything just started to spin, and I wish I could say it was the adrenaline of it, but what it was the other emotions coming in. Like, thinking about it, at any point in time, and same thing for them, they didn't know me, but at any point in time, they could have pulled a gun. They could have drove past and ran me over.
Right.
There could have been so many things that escalated the situation because I couldn't control my temper over a parking spot. And so the emotions after anger were shame and guilt and this sadness and then this feeling of loss because I didn't know who I was and who I had become. And I wish I could say that that's the defining moment. Adrienne, that is it. But truth is that wasn't it. There were still moments where I was angry. There were still moments where I felt broken and I let my emotions have all this control over me. And it's the culmination of a lot of incidences like that, although this one was very, very powerful, that led me to decide I needed to change things. Wow. And driving was a great starting point. So then when people would cut me off, I would tell myself a story about maybe they cut me off because their wife is pregnant and having a baby and they need to get to the hospital.
Thank you for saying that. So right away I relate to what your story, because I think most people have that, especially in a specific stage of their life when they're like still kind of, there's spunk, there's like, you just want to go in and guns blazing. And so I felt like that too when I was in my 20s. I'm an old man right now, but like back then I felt on the highway somebody cuts you off. It's like you have that. I don't know where we get that from. Maybe even like you watch movies and you see that happening, and then on some kind of subconscious level you're emulating some of that. But when you get angry, and when I talk to several different, I had a really wonderful counselor, psychologist over here on the show, and we were talking about emotions, and another book author about stress. And literally what happens is when we get so stressed out, when we get so angry, we go into our reptile brain, right? We go into that, no cognition at all. We're just like, we're not thinking. The thinking brain is off because you're in this fight or flight mode. And then no logical thinking can kind of break through, like, hey, no, that's not good, slow down. It's only when we kind of exit that emotion and things come back and we reconnect with our higher brain is when we have that cognition. And so when you described what you experienced, that's what I was thinking in terms of like what was happening to you. Literally all those emotions, guilt and shame, those are the higher level emotions that basically just came in after your rage kind of went away. But it's interesting to hear you say that it took like several different episodes, or like not even episodes, but like these outbursts of anger that you logically sort of derived that, I don't want to be doing that. It sounds like that's kind of like where you went, versus some people have to be like end up in jail or something, or like have a really like traumatic experience to get them to actually get that jolt in which they're like, I think I need to see someone or do something with me or meditate or something.
Yeah.
So what happened after that? So over time, you built up to the point where you said, I think I need to do something about it.
Yeah, and I just started taking those small actions, starting with driving. And then I started to really analyze my mindset and my emotional management. And what it really came down to was going back to that teeter-totter. I started focusing on the anger and trying to resolve that, but the sadness and the feeling broken and defective, to the point that I felt like I couldn't solve this, was an underlying current the entire time. And I really had to take small, actionable, daily steps, like giving people grace in the car and managing my mindset and paying attention to triggers and going, okay, retrospective in a lot of it, at least to start, was I got really angry about that. Why? And I started to realize that anger is a blanket emotion, and I can take that off, and underneath it I can see the fear, and I can see the worry and all these things that we want to hide. And for me, I would blanket and hide those with anger. But when I could take the anger blanket off and really start to analyze and work through those emotions, I could take actionable steps to feel better. And those actionable steps allowed me to start to feel not defective, but capable. I started making that progress. So started to feel capable. And when you feel capable, you start to feel qualified. And when you feel qualified, you feel confident. And when you feel confident, you can go get anything. And so I really started to lean into that, and I started to feel the capable and the qualified and the confident. And I kind of hit this point where I went, going back to, I was watching videos and listening to podcasts, and I would hear these interviews from other people, and I would feel like that light wasn't at the end of the tunnel for me. I decided that I wanted to start sharing my journey right then and there so that I could show them that they're not alone in this, I'm not alone in this, and we can progress and start to feel capable together. And that really jump-started my business, Happiness Abound. And the mission and the tagline is, you are capable of happiness abound. Point being to remind everyone that if we can start to feel capable, the rest will fall into place. And we feel capable by taking action, making progress. And a lot of that starts by analyzing and acknowledging our emotions.
I love it. How did you come about with, it seems like, well, you have everything kind of thought out and sequenced, and what kind of influences did you have? Did you, like, what kind of books may be influential, or is this something that you derived based on your own experience?
So, of course, a hybrid. But in that time of desperation, trying to just be happier. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be sad. I just want to be happy. And that's what everyone wants. Let's hope by our age and anytime you're out of school that you don't have a worst enemy, right? But even your worst enemy, or that jerk boss at work, or whatever, whoever it is, everybody wants to be happy. And I just wanted that. And it was to a point where I was so desperate for that happiness that I would just type in happiness, and would hope that some article would magically show up, or some podcast or whatever that was. And the defining book, highly recommend. And actually, I love her books that move forward after this as well. But Gretchen Rubin's The Happiness Project. I was in an airport, desperate, and looking for anything on the magazine racks and the books that said happiness, and maybe it would help me. And her book, The Happiness Project, I picked up. And I started to read it. And the concept of it is that she decides to dedicate and focus on her happiness in theme months, and focus on doing little things every day. So I started to do that and emulate the book and start my own happiness project, if you will. And that was when I started to get the small progresses to help me feel capable and to make those. Now, her stuff is not based on the emotional piece, but more of the action-oriented piece, and it's very segmented for her. But I picked what I knew I needed, and I knew I needed to focus on emotions and all those other components, because anger was a big piece for me, a big instigator for me to move forward in this way. And so that's a book that really transformed my life. And since then, books that have a lot to do with habits are huge for me.
Oh my gosh, you just took the words out of my mouth. When you described doing small little actions every day, there's this book that I wrote, Atomic Habits. And the author is talking about exactly that, how we can do tiny little steps in order to form new habits. And then once we form certain habits, we can do habit stacking, meaning that you can do once you have something that's a habitual action, you can, on top of that, you can connect another action, and that way make that even sort of build a chain.
Yep.
So that's so funny that you mentioned that, those tiny little steps. Tell me more about that. How's that working for you?
To blend the two, and I'm going to go a little bit of a different direction as well. But so speaking of books, Power of Habit is amazing. Also by Gretchen Rubin is Better Than Before. Fantastic. And then her third, I don't know the order of her books. She also did some biographies and things like that. But the third book that's my favorite of hers is The Four Tendencies, which is amazing for understanding your expectations, which is, it sounds like a weird alignment to habits, but it's not. So there's the four tendencies that she goes through. I'll let you and your watchers and listeners look it up themselves. It's amazing. But four tendencies that everyone falls into, and that's upholders, obligers, rebels, and questioners. And knowing where you fit in those tendencies can help you set yourself up for success in habit formation. Because, for instance, obligers, they do really, really well with accountability. They pretty much have to have accountability. They're the type of people who will do amazing for other people, but then for their own goals, they can struggle.
So they sacrifice their side.
They oblige.
Oblige, right.
Exactly. And so she talks about how this isn't a negative thing for a lot of obligers, and that's the highest percentage of the tendency is obligers. A lot of them feel like they just can't get it together, or there's something wrong with them, and why can't they follow through? And looking at these 4 tendencies, you can actually see the positives of that and also see how you can set yourself up for success in your habit formation and goals. Other one is questioner, which is an idea and concept around you have to be able to justify, whether it's internal or external, you're going to justify it and make sense.
Like justify your action or?
Justify the ability to go after whatever it is, whatever the expectation is. So in a personal space, those that are questioners will get all the information and all the details before they take the action. In a professional space, they're the types of individuals that will ask you a lot of questions when you're assigning a project or a task, and it's not coming from a place of defensiveness or a place of obstinance.
They just want to know.
They need to know for them to be able to take the action. So it's been great in a professional capacity as well, but it's amazing for the habit formation. Then rebels, they like to dig their heels in. They like to rebel against all of it. They don't like to feel like they're controlled. And so looking at their tendency, options are the way. And actually I have a woman that I mentored who's a rebel, and she went to the gym and met with a personal trainer. And as they wrapped it up, and she knew she was a rebel, due to me being like, read this book. And the personal trainer at the end of it's like, okay, here's your meal plan and here's your workout. And she goes, I'm going to need 2 other options on top of this. And the trainer, who I think was probably an upholder, which we'll get to, that's the last one, was like, no, this will be fine. This will work for you. If you do these things, you'll lose the weight, you'll get healthy, etc. And she goes, no. I understand that. I totally respect where you're coming from, and I know you know this works. I know me as a rebel, this feels confining. I need to have some options, all positive, all good. I need to be able to choose between things so I feel like I'm in control and I'm making the decisions while still pursuing this goal. So yeah, that's what rebels need. And the last one is upholders, which actually do a really good job at setting expectations and knowing their boundaries, whether it's internal or external expectations.
Right.
But knowing that, they tend to hold themselves too high of a standard and maybe don't embody the questioner piece where they're asking questions. Sometimes they just kind of go blindly. And I can say that because I'm an upholder. But that was an instrumental piece of understanding my habit formations and also how to help my clients that I mentor. So those are the 3 books, The Power of Habit, Better Than Before, and The 4 Tendencies that really jump-started this habit formation. Now, the next piece of this is, which feels like it could be a little off, but I think it will be fun, is in terms of my own habits, I have a lot that I have cultivated and worked on, but I'm currently in phase 3 of 75 Hard. Have you heard of it?
No idea what that is. Tell me more.
So there's a podcaster, Andy Frisella. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. And
he's going to let us know.
Yeah. And he, full transparency, I actually haven't listened to his other podcast episodes. I've only listened to those that he has on 75 Hard. And it was recommended to me to check out 75 Hard. I actually knew people who were doing it and didn't finish. And I was like, what is this? I'm really intrigued by this. And what it is a mental toughness challenge. And the idea is that for a lot of individuals, there's things like the book ending and chaining habits and all of that, but there has to be a mental toughness and discipline to create and maintain habits. So his whole concept is that if you can do 5 items for 75 days, it's like technically I think 5 or 6, but workouts.
As in consistency wise? Okay.
So for 75 days straight, no cheats, no compromises, it will change your life. And he has 4 phases and a foundation. So he has a foundation phase, which is 75 Hard. And that includes a 45-minute workout, a 45-minute workout outside, no ifs, ands, or buts. So right now we're in kind of snowy weather.
Yeah.
You still have to go outside and work out for 45 minutes.
Shovel your driveway.
Walk up and down. Exactly. So 2 workouts, 45 minutes apiece. One has to be outside. 1 gallon of water a day, a progress picture a day, reading 10 pages of a personal development or business book. And then the last one is to maintain a meal plan. no cheat meals. So 75 days of that will change your life.
Wow. Yeah, for sure.
So that's foundation. And then phase 1 is 30 days of doing that plus 3 power items. Then phase 2 is 30 days of a break from that. And actually I'm on day 2 of phase 3, which is 75 hard all over again.
Wow.
But it is a game changer.
Well, it's said that it takes 30 days or 21 days to form a habit. I don't know if that's true or not, but
Totally depends on the individual.
I would say so, yeah. I think you need to qualify a lot of these kind of generic statements because, yeah, it depends on what it is, who it is, and where they are, and what kind of external stressors might be influencing them, right? But 75 days, and that sounds like a pretty tight regiment over there to do everything and every single day.
Every single day. And I love that you said it depends on these external factors of what's happening. Because during my first phase, well, foundation and phase 1, when I did it before, I had unexpected work trips come up. I love free food. I love free food. And I like to eat. And so it was really hard to have a really strict, for me, it wasn't just a diet. I actually did a meal plan because I knew if I had a lot of fluctuation, that wouldn't work for me.
Right.
And we had client dinners and business trips, and I had to go to conferences that were unexpected and all these things for work. And people wanting to connect with me and like, hey, let's go to lunch. Yeah. And me being like, I absolutely can. Here's my cookies that are like energy balls, super healthy, that I'm eating while everyone's devouring this delicious pasta and all these beautiful desserts. And I'd never been to Texas more than the airport. And I went to a conference in Austin and everyone had barbecue, and I love barbecue.
Yeah.
And I was 3 days away from finishing. And I was like, this is great. But it was so interesting too, though, because the component of mental toughness, and I'll circle back how this relates to happiness, is that we often don't have the mental toughness to monitor our progress and to set the habits in place. And granted, I had this already, but 75 hard was a whole nother level. But the point being that your brain, when you're feeling defective or broken, it's because you have evidence of feeling like you have failed over and over and over and over again. And when you can start to build habits and you can maintain that momentum and that chain, and you say, I've committed to doing this, I'm going to do it. And every day that you do that and you stand by that commitment, even if it's just to yourself, you build evidence on the other side that you can do these things, and that builds the feeling of feeling capable, confident, etc.
There was even simple things that helped me out is, and I think it was actually Jerry Seinfeld. Someone asked him, like, how do you get really good at,
don't break the chain.
Exactly. Create that chain. So just like have a calendar and just every day, just mark it when you did what you wanted to do. And it just creates that. Then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm like 3 weeks in. I'm like, I'm not going to mess it up right now by cheating on food or whatever thing, and so it kind of creates that positive reinforcement to kind of continue on. So, all those little tips and tricks that we need to kind of employ to convince ourselves to do things.
100%. And I think it comes back to, too, when you feel unhappy in the sense of I'm defective or I'm broken, then the feelings of worthlessness and all of that also come together on it. You have to build the evidence for the positive. You have to build that evidence in your brain so that you know you can continue moving forward. And for so many people, there's this concept, and especially we're in January, right? So the concept of, I'm going to start on New Year's, or I'm going to start on Monday. And then when it drops, because of the mental toughness not being there or whatever it is, then that builds evidence on the other side. And it gets harder and harder to build that forward momentum to start. But once you can start, if you can maintain it, it's upwards from there, and your whole life changes. It's from something so simple. It doesn't have to be something that's as monumental as 75 hard feels.
Right.
It can be very small things like, that guy cut me off. His wife's pregnant. She's having the baby. He's rushed to the hospital. Or the other story I would tell myself was that person hasn't had a job and they have an interview and they're running late and they really need this job. things to try and build that empathy for others and give grace.
Compassion for others.
Yeah.
An antidote to anger. Makes sense.
Yes. Just like an attitude of gratitude.
Yeah.
Right? It's a similar vein that grace and gratitude do a lot. Grace and gratitude for other people, and then also grace and gratitude for yourself. When you do miss a habit, having grace to go, okay, I'm going to move forward, having gratitude to look at what can I learn from this and how can I move forward, and then making the choice to move forward instead of going, well, that's one more in the evidence for this side.
So we went from anger, recognition of anger, recognition of the fact that you needed to do something about it, to habit formation, which is tools and techniques to actually continue to implement something day in and day out. How do you bring that back to happiness? How do you connect the habits? Because you mentioned habits of working out and eating right and all those different things, which I'm happy that someone is doing that, because it sounds more holistic. It sounds more not just like, oh, happiness is in this little pill. Here, take that.
No,
it's like you have to take care of your body and your and food, the stuff that you ingest. It's like it's more than just an attitude. It's more than just meditation. It's everything else that impacts you around. So I'm happy to hear that's kind of like the plan that you have with all of that. But connected back now to happiness. What are you doing now for those specific? What are your habits for happiness? What are those tiny things that you do in order to stay happy, be happy? And what does happiness mean to you?
Okay, well, let's go one at a time.
Let's unpack that run-on sentence.
So first and foremost, connecting the emotions and the need to have emotional management with the habit. There's a tool and technique that I use. It's called the CLEAR model. And it's CLEAR, C-L-E-A-R. Right, have to write that out. And it's an acronym. So C is circumstance, L is language, E is emotions, A is action, R is results. And there's different variations of this out there. CLEAR is what I call it. And it helps you get clear on who you want to be and things like that, which is perfect. But essentially it turns into that the circumstance, no matter what it is neutral. Doesn't matter. You get in a car accident, neutral. Get fired from your job, neutral. You get a raise, neutral. Every circumstance, situation is neutral. Next step is language. The language that we tell ourselves around that situation is what gives it meaning in a positive or a negative direction. That language then immediately filters down to the E, which is emotion. And we're emotional beings. We take action and we think that we think logically, but really it's mostly that emotion. A lot of it is
emotion, yeah.
So here we are thinking these things instantaneously for a lot of us. That thought, negative or positive, brings up an emotion. Then what we do is we act on that emotion, and then it gives us certain results. So in terms of habits, cycling through the CLEAR model, whether retrospectively and then you'll get to a point where it happens naturally, you can choose your language to then choose the rest of those pieces. And even just having that as a habit or just knowing about it and thinking it through makes such a difference. Because in terms of your happiness, I can think negative thoughts or I can think positive thoughts. And I can share an example there. Apparently it's a day for car examples, but I actually was rear-ended at a light. And it wasn't my fault. I was rear-ended. The light was green. I was going. The person behind me ran into me. So we pull over to the side, and my first thought, because unfortunately, anger still is a template. I should note that I'm not happy all the time. It's always a work in progress, and I'm human. I'm going to have 50% of my emotions are going to be negative. But the idea is, how can we take actions and create the mindsets and implement the habits that swing us quickly from I'm experiencing this, why, what can I do, solve, acknowledge, sit in it for a minute if you need to then swing the pendulum back over to happiness and positivity and joy much more frequently instead of living over here, living over here.
Makes sense.
So first reaction was, are you kidding me? Chick was probably on her phone. Like, I'm starting to get angry, right? And you can hear the language. Are you kidding me? It's a little hit of sarcasm and victim there. She was probably on her phone. That's definitely me blaming and victim and like, how dare she? And I caught myself, because I have years of practice of the clear model at this point, lots of retroactive practice. But in this instance, I caught myself and I went, no. I do not want to go down that path. So I changed my language. And the quickest way that I can change my language is that I use a tool called declarations, where I have a declaration. It's changed recently. It doesn't change very often, but at the time it was, I am an intuitive mentor, vibrant, abundant, and filled with light. And that's something I would say to myself all the time. So during the time of getting rear-ended, I want to change my language. I snap into that.
Ah, I see. So essentially you used a habit of repeating that almost like mantra to redirect the brain from like, all right, we're going to the, crocodile brain and full emotion and anger and all of that. Use language to kind of redirect it back into the cognitive side, meaning, oh, what is happening right now? That is very interesting. That's very NLP-ish.
Well, and using the declaration, if I look at it and I look at what I'm telling myself, part of it is I am an intuitive mentor, vibrant, abundant, and filled with light. If I want to be vibrant, and that's who I want to be, if I want to be vibrant, abundant, and filled with light, I can't get out of this car angry.
Oh, I see okay. I get it. So in addition to having it kind of intercept so that you have to process it linguistically, you also have key words that in order to make a statement that I am, you have to become that. You have to be that.
Yes.
So, and by exclusivity, you can't be angry and that at the same time. Therefore, you're going, that is brilliant.
And that's my best self. Now, that's not saying that's who I am all the time. That's a declaration of who I want to be. And I can then use the clear model and that declaration to make conscious decisions in every neutral circumstance to decide how I want to handle this based on who I want to be. So using that language, now if we go down both sides here, are you kidding me? I can't believe it, blah, blah, blah. Then that leads and feeds the emotion almost instantaneously of anger and victim mentality and blame and all these other things, which then leads to the action of me getting out of the car, being angry and upset. What the hell are you doing? Were you on your phone texting? I can't believe that. Then leads to the results of calling the police. We're here for 2 hours. Maybe they have road rage. It triggers them. We're fighting on the side of the road. I don't know. But that's that path. Mm-hmm. Fast forward to what really happened, thank goodness, was I told myself my declaration. It calmed me down. Because here's the other piece. We think that we have to go from here to here really quick. And the truth of it is, I can say that declaration to just neutralize me, to clear the head, like you said, to clear it out and just be like, okay, I don't have to be vibrant, abundant, and filled with light and happy about...
I'm so happy that you rear-ended my car, right? You don't have to...
You don't have to do that. Right. Like, that feels fake and false.
And that would be not normal, yeah.
Yeah, it'd be weird.
Yeah.
Like, after the fact, I'm really glad because I have this great story. But at the time, you're not going to come out and be like, I'm so glad that you ran into me. And when people do think that that's what happiness is, their brain goes, that's false, no. And then they can't act on it.
You don't believe that.
Yeah, exactly. So it just has this undercurrent of sarcasm and weirdness, and people don't vibe with that.
It's just another veil, right?
Exactly. So you say the declaration, mine is personalized to me of who I want to be, and then that neutralizes the emotions. At that point, you can take clear action and get clear results. So in my case, I said my declaration, I get out of the car, and I go and I look at my car. This individual, she gets out of her car, she looks at hers, and I'm like, hey, are you okay? She says, yeah. It doesn't get better from here on her side, but yeah. Doesn't ask me if I'm okay. It's like, okay, is your car okay? Yeah, I think so. She's acting irritated that she ran into me. And at this point is another opportunity for me to be like,
you're trying me.
Yeah, are you kidding me right now? And I was like, no. So in my head, I'm an intuitive mentor, vibrant, abundant, and filled with light. Just say it really, really quick. And I'm like, okay, well, looks like my car's okay. If you're okay, I'm okay. My car's 21 years old. Like, it's fine. And it's just a fender bender bumper thing. And I'm like, okay, yeah, this is fine. If you're fine, like, I'm good. She goes, I'm good too. I'm like, okay, great. Well, have a nice day. And something that if I had taken the negative route, could have been a 2-hour ordeal, police reports, all of that, was 5 minutes. Now remember, I don't like being mildly inconvenienced. 5 minutes here is a huge win compared to here.
Right.
But the difference being how I decided to handle it and who I wanted to be, and using the clear model and my language to influence that situation and how I acted in it. Which ultimately, if I can repeat that over in every situation, or because situations happen and we don't always think that clearly, I can retrospectively and then get in the habit of doing it in the moment, that will always lead to me feeling happier. Because I'm leaning into that version of me that I want to become, and I've defined that, and I'm acting on it, and that habit alone can help anybody start to be happier.
That is an amazing story. I really love it. It's almost like forming, feeling happy as almost like as a habit, but not like habit as in like, oh, let me convince myself that I'm happy, but doing certain steps that will put you in the place that you feel like you're happy. Yep. Because it's not like fake happiness, like, oh yeah, I'm going to make the best of it. It's sort of like really using language and the cognitive abilities that we have in order to redirect us away from anger. And if you're away from anger, well, people tend to be just happy if they're not angry. I mean, they're either neutral, whatever, or like, okay, I'm mildly happy or I'm super happy, but at least not negative, not angry.
Well, and there's a piece of this too that is going back to that we're humans. 50% of the time we're going to feel negative emotions. And one thing that I notice as a huge roadblock for my clients and for my podcast listeners, and even my teams at work in a professional capacity on that way, is this perfectionist mindset. We think we have to have it all figured out right here, right now, and I have to be happy right now. And if this didn't work, or I messed up one time, that's it, and I can't keep doing it. And the truth of it is it's those small habits and those small, simple actions every single day, or as often as possible, and giving yourself the grace and gratitude alongside of that will lead to feeling happier. But the second that we have this mindset of perfectionism and, oh, I didn't do what I was supposed to do, I must be broken, 10 steps backwards, that doesn't get you anywhere.
Right. You're constantly beating yourself up over whatever the circumstance may be, and that just going to leave you to a negative path.
Yeah.
How do you define happiness in your life? What does that mean to you?
So I want to look at this two different ways. One is, I love that you said to you, because happiness and what it looks like to me is entirely different than what it may look like to you, or what it may look like to someone else. And that's something that, as a transformational happiness mentor, I really have to hone in on that with my clients, because so often, and this is the clients I work with, is they've met the societal checklist. They've gotten the degree, they've gotten married, they've bought the house, they have the kids, they have the great corner office job, and or they run their own business, or they have a great job and they're doing a side hustle, or whatever it is, but they've met this checklist of society's versions of success. Mm-hmm. And let's face it, we often buy into that checklist of success as happiness. And a lot of the individuals that I work with have bought into that. And then they're like, I should have everything. I should be grateful. I should be feeling so much happier in my life. And I'm just not fulfilled and I'm not happy. So it's taking away that societal checklist and looking at what really helps them be happy and figuring out that for them with emotional exercises and management, which we've talked about, but then also day-to-day actions and tracking successes and using declarations and a million and one other components there of letting emotions go and bringing in good things and documenting and all these components and aspects of it. But it comes down to so many people buy into this checklist and then they're not happy. And so it really does come down to, what is happiness for you? So I love that you asked that. So to answer that, happiness for me is really, and you already have noticed this about me, I'm very systematic. I'm a planner of communication. So I'll break this up into 3 steps, which is, for me, part 1 is living in my values. And that's a part of kind of my happiness journey as well, is what are my values? What do I stand for? Who am I? And who do I want to be? So if I can live within my values, which I will try to rattle them off. I guarantee I'll forget one because I'm in the hot seat. But my values are integrity, impact, interdependence, abundance, and growth.
You just need to make that into an acronym.
I know, but it's like 3 I's, a G, and a A. It's really, I don't know how to do it there. And I always forget one of the I's, so I have to say them up front. But if what those are defined for me, if I'm living in that, I know that I am set up for success in my own happiness. So that's part A. Part B is, and that's foundational, right? Part B is really looking at my relationships. I love my family and my husband and my dogs and my friends. And I love that connection point. And I actually really love to, if you can't tell, I love to teach. I love to teach and I love to talk and I love to empower people and then listen and hear what they need and being like, okay, I can help you, but you have to take the action. And so the third component of that is kind of building on living in my values, looking at those relationships, and then taking that and living my purpose. And I have an internal and external purpose, which may sound counterintuitive to some, but for me, my internal purpose is that I believe I'm here to learn and grow as much as possible. Growth is one of my values. That's why I'm here. My external purpose is to take that knowledge and to help remind people that they are capable of happiness abound. And if I have that set, that's happiness to me. And of course, there's fun and things like that engaged in there, right, but that's the core of it.
Wow. True to your form. You got everything in neat little boxes. And I just wonder if you go through your day and like, okay, check, I got that. Okay, I'm happy. Or is it at this point so part of your habitual being and doing that you're like, oh, I feel happy, and behind the scenes, all those things that you defined are fulfilled on one level or another. When you have like, hey, I did this. Wow, I satisfied everything that I really care about. But do you say at the end of the day, like, I'm happy?
I would say yes and no. It started out that way because I had to build the evidence. So the checklist, not breaking the chain, all of that really came into play to build the habits. So then at the start, when I really, really needed to have that momentum and that progress and that visibility into it, yes, that's exactly what it was. Do I have, and I can't even remember what it was on my first tracker, which was, I had 5 to 7 things that I would do every single day. And I don't remember all of them, but I know for sure journaling was one of them. Writing things out, journaling is huge for me. It's very freeing, and it allows me to clear up my mental space and my emotional space to be able to see things objectively and really take the chaos that's in my brain and organize it, even if it's just writing it on paper, so that I can see solutions easier. I'm
so glad that you mentioned that, because I started journaling some time ago. Mm-hmm. Now, I am not perfect about it because it does take time and you got to form it into a habit. But what I've noticed that just the sheer activity of writing something down, mm-hmm, stuff that you think about, and in your head, it's just such a complex, it's a chaos and it's an order and everything, but it's a different space. When you need to go through like your mind and your filters and everything in order to output that and write it down on paper, some kind of a magical thing happens, because you need to decide what is it that you're going to write down. Versus in your brain, you can go 1,000 miles an hour and it can be here and here and here and here. But if you need to write it down, like, well, I need to compose this sentence into something that I mean. What is it? Yeah. And then it becomes real. And I think that process is just so beneficial.
100%. And it's organizing, taking all of that and organizing it. And that's huge. So I do know for sure that was on one of my first cards. But that said, now I don't look at the end of the day and go, was I happy? I think that's a great technique. I think that's super helpful. But it gets you in a space that's good for foundation. But it can eventually get you into a space where you don't measure your happiness in the moment. You measure it looking back. Mm. At which point, was it happiness and joy throughout the day, or is it happiness and joy that's an accomplishment energy? There's a slight difference.
Right.
And so as you move through and expand upon happiness techniques and habits and things like that, it becomes, and I love this, it's instantaneous on the sense of I am to a point now where I can look and go, not necessarily ask, am I happy? But I can just feel the joy and acknowledge it and not feel guilty for it. Where before it was, oh my gosh, was I happy? And oh, should I have been happy? And I'm supposed to be broken and defective because that's, so that was a fluke or whatever it was, to I'm building this up. And at the end of the day, did I live by what I wanted to live by? Did I do what I wanted to do that will help me feel happier? To then, those are habitual. I feel happier and I can acknowledge it and feel it in the moment. And that is a true presence of joy and happiness versus that accomplishment energy that I finished my checklist. But it's all progress. And wherever you're at in the journey, and I'm sure there's other levels I haven't even reached yet, but it comes back to happiness expert. I don't know what that really means, right? Because I'm sure there's other levels that I'm not an expert in. But wherever you're at in that journey, it all comes down to acknowledgement of progress. Even if that acknowledgement of progress is like, I'm really happy right now. Right? Like right now, I can tell you I'm overjoyed and very happy that I get to say my values and share techniques and share these stories and have this conversation with you in this great studio. And I can live in that moment and that joy right now, as well as at the end of the day be like, I did a good job. You know what I mean? And you can kind of have the hybrid.
Yeah.
But there is an evolution where it does become habitual and you can start to feel happy in the moment. And that's when a lot of things start to shift. And you start to feel the foundation is there, and then the abundance of joy and the abundance of relationships and the abundance of your values and all those components start to really come into place because you're living a happy life instead of striving for it.
I love it. I love everything you said thus far. I love how you're not treating happiness as some kind of destination, which is going in line with what you mentioned when people have these all these checklists, that checklist of things like, I got this, got the car, got beautiful wife, got kids, got car, got, whatever. And then in the end, they're not happy. How many millionaires and billionaires have we heard about, being just purely unhappy, even though they are accomplished in anybody's definition, they accomplished a lot and yet they're unhappy. So what is it? It's, and some people say, well, money doesn't bring happiness. And there's different debates on that. Well, it can definitely buy you more time. And then if you know what to do with that time, you can put yourself in a place of happiness. And sometimes people don't have this introspective, this introspection where they notice, oh, I'm happy. Why am I happy? And then try to break it down.
Yeah.
So then they can maybe try to replicate it in the future. They feel like, oh, if I only do this, if I get to this point, then I'm going to be happy, as if it was a destination. I can tell you from my own experience, that's how I felt in the past. I felt like, oh, if I'm going to do this, have that, then I will finally be happy, truly free, as if it's as if you're climbing some kind of a mountain and here I am, I have arrived, and now I am happy. And what am I going to do now that I go down?
Yeah. Well, and happiness is so personalized, but also we do fall into that trap of,
That would be a great title for a book.
I'll be happy when.
Personalized happiness.
Ooh, yeah. You heard it here first. But it is personalized happiness. I like that a lot. But also, we all fall into that trap of I'll be happy when. I'll be happy when I make the money, which I have opinions about money and happiness. But I'll be happy when. And then when that happens, it comes down to you've done all the work to get to whatever that is, thinking it's going to bring you happiness, when the foundational components of being happy has been inside of you and have been a choice the whole time. And so it's not choosing I'll be happy when, it's choosing I'll be happy now as I grow towards this. And when we use the I'll be happy when mindset, it pushes us towards a goal. Yes, great. But when we accomplish it, we just don't feel it. And it's almost it's a carrot and a whip, right? Whipping to I got to get here so I can be happy versus a carrot, which is I'm happy and I still want to achieve this. And I think, again, with my own internal mission and purpose is to continue to learn and grow always. I think that the enemy of happiness is stagnation. And we intuitively know that. So we think, I'll be happy when, and I have to progress to this, and then I'll be happy. But the truth of it is if you can, again, monitor your progress, then you're not stagnant, and you can be making progress to a goal. But if that progress is tied into your happiness here and now, you can be happy and still progress and achieve the success and the dream life and whatever it is that you want, but you're happy along the way.
Yeah,
and that's everything.
I love that you said that, and my wife reminds me this constantly. It's not a destination, it's the journey. It's you noticing as you are on this journey the accomplishments that you've made, and it's so easy for our brains to quickly downplay our accomplishments and things that we did. And if we only had that habit or mechanism of going back and say, like, look, I did this, I did that, I did that, this is just so awesome, versus like just focusing on something negative. You saw someone riding the car that you always wanted, you don't have it yet, and you're like, oh, my life sucks. Yeah, but turn around and take a look at what else you accomplished. You know, it's wonderful. If you just focus on that, you'd be almost immediately happy. And wasn't it Shakespeare? Someone said it, that it's, there's no, what did he say? There's no good or bad or something like that, but what your mind makes so you can make your own mind if you're happy. Like, you can literally drive yourself to unhappiness in an instant. You just start thinking about all these negative things and just watch how your body, how your emotions, everything changes. And conversely, you can drive that towards happiness as well.
Clear model.
The
language you're using to tell yourself feeds the rest.
I love what I just kind of vaguely described over here. You have like in a structured construction over here, like, yeah, here you are. I love that. Is this something that you, you clearly read a lot of books and educated yourself in this field, so
yes.
you're the expert in this. Is this like a fusion of different things? Is it a source, this clear model? Is this something that you purely came up with, or did you come up with this on from different books or something like that? What's the
I wish I could take credit for it. I can't. I can take credit for the name and the adjustments I've made. So I originally heard about this concept from Brooke Castillo. She has a podcast called The Life Coach School, and she also has a life coach program. And I originally heard about it from her, and she just called it the model, and she didn't use the phrase language. She uses the phrase thoughts, and I was like, and it's more like thoughts, emotions, actions, results. But there's the circumstance is always neutral, so there's the C, and your thoughts are really the language you're using, and that language can also be interpreted internally or externally. Like if something happens and I come and I just dump on you all this negative language, that's feeding my emotions, that's feeding the actions, the results, etc. So I changed it to L for language, and then kind of moved through it. So I've adjusted it for a way that makes more sense for me and that I can coach and teach it on, but definitely a culmination of my experiences, because although that setup is very similar, how you interpret it, how you teach it, how you play in that space is entirely different than somebody else. So yeah, Brooke Castillo, Life Coach School. It's an amazing podcast. She's an amazing woman. And I love that she taught this model, and I love that I can edit and adjust it to fit my clients and me.
Fantastic. And that's, what that's called? That's called innovation. When you take something and then you add on to it, modify it, tweak it, and make it, make it something else, better it, and then practice it, and from the experience see how well does it work, and where how far can we take it. So let's talk about what you do with a prospective client. Someone comes to you and says, I'm just so unhappy. Where do you start with where do you start?
It really depends on the individual. But I can tell you some of my onboarding process, which is I have them take the 4 Tendencies quiz. So the book that I was talking about earlier by Gretchen Rubin, The 4 Tendencies, she actually has an online quiz that she offers for free. So go check it out. It's great. But I have them take that because then I know how I need to communicate to set the expectations. And I've recently also added in, there's a educational quiz of all things that's your learning style. And at that point, I can learn if someone is tactile, visual, auditory, and I can adjust my coaching to fit with that as well, so that the most information gets to this person, it connects with them, and they're more likely to take action on it. And I can set them up for success by knowing, say they're a rebel, I give them 3 options to choose from their homework and just tell me how it goes. Whereas for an upholder like myself, I can say, hey, I need you to do this, and they'll do it. And I can train, it is training, because I'm training them on these tools because the other component of this is it's not therapy. And I think that they can go hand in hand. But my vision and opinion is that therapy can help you solve the things in the past and work through that. Mentoring can help you move forward. And both work in tandem very, very well. They're not in competition. And I work with a lot of people who have been in therapy for so long, but they feel stagnant because they're reliving the past and trying to work through all of that. Necessary, but you have to have progression to feel happier. And that's usually when they also come to me. So with that being said, I try to equip them. It's not like I'm going to have you come to me for 10 years. I don't want that. That's not what I'm about. It's how do I work with you, give you the tools you need so that you are equipped and you're able to move forward with or without me. But you have the tools and you're equipped. So it's looking at the learning styles, it's looking at their expectations, inner and outer, and facilitating an environment that can allow and cultivate for that learning so that they can have those tools in their toolbox. Then they can act on them, and they come back to me weekly for a 10-week period. They report on their successes every single day so that we're building that evidence, and they're doing their homework and all these pieces, and within a 10-week time frame. And I'm actually really proud of this. It makes me cry a little bit. When I first meet with people, I ask them, where are they at on their happiness scale? Like 1 out of 10, 10 being like, I'm ecstatically overjoyed and happy. And almost all my clients come to me at a 2 or a 3.
Oh my goodness.
And about 5, it's a 10-week program, and about 5 weeks in, I'd be like, so how are you feeling on the scale? And it's usually jumped up to a 5 or a 6. And by week 10, it's an 8, 9, 10.
I mean, 5 and a 6 on a scale of 1 to 10, when someone comes in at 2, that's like 300% increase in happiness.
Huge.
It's huge.
But a lot of it is that understanding of how they work, what are their templates, knowing where they're at, and customizing weekly on what they need, and them doing the work themselves. I'm just a facilitator. I'm a mentor, right? And they take the action. And that's the coolest part, is to see them go from a 2 to a 9 or a 10. And it's so funny because nobody wants to admit they're a 10. Like, even in the program, they're like, yeah, it was like a 9 and 3/4 today. And I'm like, is it a 10? And they're like, yeah, it's a 10. And I'm like, okay, that's great. But people have this weird thing about not wanting to admit they're happy, which is a whole other deal. But obviously, I don't have a problem with that. I've had to work through it. But it's so amazing to see them take the action. And that's the difference. It goes back to your happiness journey is you. And so when my clients work with me, it's not about me. And I'm sharing stories of me here, but it's not about me. It's about what will work for them. And they take the action. They are equipped. And that builds their evidence. It has nothing to do with me.
I love the engineer side of me loves the procedural aspect of how you do this. When we talked originally before this podcast, you said like, oh yeah, it's about like taking these actions every day. I just break everything down into this tasking, because that is just so. It's like eating an elephant with a spoon, like one spoon at a time, right? Yeah. And it's like you can almost accomplish anything if you set your mind to it and do it step by step. And once you get into that habit of doing it, then it feels almost effortless, because then you don't even see it as a chore. If you see it like, I got to do this and that today, and it just becomes a chore. But if you are already in that habit mode where you're just doing it, like I wake up and I meditate. It's just like I wake up and I brush my teeth. It's the same thing. It's like I don't even think about it. It's just part of like who I am and what I do. And when you get to that place, it's a wonderful place, because then again, you don't have those negatives that will bring you down. Like, I got to do this and that, and it just breaks your day apart. Yeah. Versus if it just happens habitually, and boom, it's done.
Well, and to circle back to the 75 hard, that's 75 days of these things with no compromise, no cheats, and the mental fortitude that it takes to commit to what you've committed to is huge. And so there are going to be times where you wake up late and you're like, I don't want to meditate. And you're not going to be happy all the time, right? And so it's like, how do you build these habits when you've gotten to a point that they're habitual, but you still have a little bit of a hard time? How do you have the mental fortitude to keep going? And a lot of that comes down to, for instance, for the first foundation phase of 75 Hard, for me, it was pure grit. Like, I'm going to do this, because actually only 1% of people will try it, and half of that percent will actually finish. So I'm like, I'm going to finish.
I'm going to one of those.
Right. Pure grit. It's a challenge. I'm heading into phase 2, now in phase 3. I'm doing it because I saw such amazing results. I can't live without it. And what that comes down to is the mental fortitude to go meditating, which, funny enough, meditating doesn't help me. But so I recommend it to the individuals that they need it, but it's something that doesn't work for me very well.
We'll talk about that.
Yes. But I think it's a perspective change for me. But where I was going with this was, when you know that it works for you, when you don't feel like doing it, you put your happiness and who you want to be above the small instant of, I don't want to do this. You don't let that win, if you will. And that makes all the difference. Don't let the negative emotions win. Work through them and come back to the other side. Don't let that circumstance control you. Work through the clear model, come back to the other side. Don't let someone tell you who to be. Set a declaration, work through that, come back to the other side. But you have to monitor that progress, of course, but also that fortitude to not let that I'm so tired. It's been a long day. I'm going to pull from my work day today. I had 4 one-on-ones. I came back from vacation. Monday was my first day back, and it was 2 weeks of bliss. And now I'm back in this, I'm doing damage control for 2 weeks of all these things happening. And I can look at that and be like, the last thing I want to do is eat healthy. I just want a donut, right? But you know that donut's not going to solve the problem. And if you give into that, eating the sugar or buffering, which is what I call it, and also another thing from Brooke Castillo, but she calls it buffering. But emotional buffering, so you don't have to feel what you're feeling instead of focusing on it and moving forward. And buffering, quick dive into that really quickly, is, and this is another one, I'm going to forget one of them, but in order of least common to most common, buffering, emotional buffering, drug use, drinking, right? So we know alcoholism and drug addiction, we tend to know that those aren't good. And so there's the less likelihood of people buffering their emotions for those, but you can also see how addictions can happen really quickly if people are using those to buffer their emotions. So those are the 2 least common. Then you come down to overeating, so binge eating, overwatching, binging Netflix.
Binging on Netflix.
Mm-hmm. Are you still watching? Yes, I am. I've watched this entire series in 2 days, right? It's escapism.
Yes.
It's buffering. Then you look at, eating, TV, video games on your phone.
Distraction.
Mm-hmm. Last one is social media. How many times have you been on your phone? I'm just going to be 5 minutes and 3 hours goes by because you had a hard day at work. Oh my gosh, I totally fall into that trap all the time. And so it's taking a look at those habits and going, okay, what am I buffering and why don't I want to feel this? And choosing to work through whatever it is you need to work through and come back to the other side. But it's socially acceptable, societally acceptable to do all those bufferings instead of focus on our emotions and move towards happiness.
Right. I was talking to a stress expert, and she was talking about those very same things, describing them as different ways that we numb ourselves.
Yep.
We numb our feelings. We come back from work stressed, and basically just those are our coping mechanisms, coping tools.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they can spin out of control when you're getting addicted to drugs and alcohol and porn, whatever else.
Yep.
And there was huge. So my wife, a disclaimer, my wife is a mental health counselor, so she's telling me about huge outbreaks of people addicted to porn, to alcohol, to drugs, and
yep.
In fact, today I had another guest that I had today. Melody was talking about opioid addiction, and so all of that is part of like. I love what's happening over here is like as I talk more and more to people for like in different disciplines, so to speak, how everything is congealing, and I always. I see this like, you got health, you got food, you got mental health, pursuit of happiness. All of these things come together, and so you have to look at all of this as a system, and not just like, oh, just this liver and that's all you need. No, it's like everything, a lot of things that affect you. So you have to keep in mind all those different factors. But what I like about your work is how structured it is. So for those people who like to follow like structured exercises or structured guides or guidelines, that is their jam, because they're like, okay, I can do these things, so at least I know I can progress. Versus for some people who are like they're not as a structured, they'll be like, oh, this is so difficult. I don't know where to start. With a program like what you're following, at least you have something to follow.
Well, and for those that don't know where to start, that's why it's customized. It's where are you at and how do you learn? What are your expectations? And let's set a starting point. And training within structure, but having the flexibility to customize it as we go is everything, because it comes back to the individual. But I was going to say something I believe very fully in. And again, I'm looking at people who are at a 2, right? And when we say, oh, it's all these things coming together, I 100% agree. But you have to start somewhere, because if you feel like it has to be everything,
that might be overwhelming.
It's too overwhelming, and then you feel like you can't do any of it.
You can't do it, right?
So if you're on the 2 scale, there's hope. You are capable. You can do it. Pick one thing, build that evidence, and you'll build a strong foundation to move up and to move up. And then when you're at a certain point, I would say probably that 5 or 6 point, you have a strong, solid foundation of knowing that you can do this. And at that point, you can start to explore those other avenues as you need to have the holistic picture of happiness.
What are your thoughts on why so many people are unhappy nowadays? I mean, look at how we live. We, on the one hand, lifestyle, like the quality of living hasn't been better ever. Yep. Go back to a couple hundred years, even 100 years ago, when people didn't have as much of anything, and now we have food here, comfort, heat, cold, whatever you want, entertainment. Mm-hmm. Someone made a statement that you technically couldn't. You don't even have to leave your home anymore. You just order everything on Amazon, just comes in and. Yeah. Why are
laundry comes to you?
Yeah, like you can any service you can imagine. You just like, I want it. It just comes in. Why are we unhappy? Like, what are your thoughts on like why it's like almost an epidemic? Like why people are so unhappy?
So I agree that's an epidemic, and I think it's a component of several things. But first, there was a study, I believe, by Harvard that found after the $75,000 a year mark, your happiness doesn't increase with your income increase.
I've heard that too.
The idea being that I can
disprove that. No, just kidding.
Well, it's not my study, so no. But the idea being, and this kind of goes back to my thoughts about money, is at that point, your bases are covered. You don't really have to worry about where your next meal is coming from. You don't have to worry about the roof over your head. Bills are paid, fresh water, hot, cold, all those things that you mentioned. Internet, it's a necessity now, right? So that covers all of those bases. Of course, this is variable depending on where you live and inflation and all of those things. But those bases are covered. And then there's a little bit of comfort money. You can go and do things like vacations and stuff like that. You're not living paycheck to paycheck, right, ideally. And after that 75,000 annual mark, anything after that is in that comfort zone. So you think we fall into the I'll be happy when. I'll be happy when I make 6 figures. I'll be happy when I do this. But it doesn't really increase the happiness because we've A, fallen into that trap, and B, all of our necessities are covered and cared for, Maslow's law, if you will. And so anything beyond that, we have to make the progress for, not our income. So I think that's a first component of it. That being said, with the epidemic piece of it, my opinion is that we have transformed as a society where we share aspects of our lives and it's the highlight reels. Well, we're living the behind the scenes, and there is comparison abundant, right? Comparison everywhere.
Social media.
Exactly.
Look at this person, how wonderful their life is, and mine just sucks. I only have a house and a car and a job and family and
But they're on vacation in Fiji.
Right.
Why don't I get a vacation in Fiji? And I think coming back to the money thing, we have a lot of this keeping up with the Joneses. And what it was, I'm going to go 30 years ago, could be back even further, but 30 years ago, the Joneses were your neighbors or they were in your community and you saw the new car or the boat or the house or they mentioned the vacation. But you weren't exposed to it every single minute of every single day, and you didn't necessarily seek it out. That was keeping up with the Joneses 30 years ago. Now, keeping up with the Joneses is, maybe I don't know you on social media, but I follow you for whatever reason. I don't know you personally, and I follow you, and I see that you're in Fiji, and you got the new car, and you got all these things, and I don't know what you're doing to afford that, but I feel like I need to keep up, so then I go into debt to try and afford that and show that I'm living that life, and that has an ability to really cap on our happiness, because along with not stagnating and progressing, as humans, we like to feel free. Right. America's founded on that.
And suddenly you have this debt, so now you have this, you're carrying that load, and that's in the back. Even if you distract yourself with toys and what have you here, in the back of your mind is like, wow, I'm going to have to pay for this, pay the piper one day.
Yeah. And psychologically, debt, this is really, I would be surprised if anybody else feels this way. I hope they do. But this is a unique thing for me to even share vocally. I haven't shared this before. I believe that debt psychologically keeps us in a mindset that we're not good enough and that we're broken and defective and we have to buy our way out. And so while it brings momentary illusions of joy, oh, I got the new car, I'm so happy, this is awesome, and then you have it for a day and it's done.
Novelty wears off.
Exactly. I'll be happy when I have the new car, and I can't afford the new car, and I don't want to work for it. I want it right now because I need to keep up with the Joneses. All of that, the key part of that is I don't want to work for it right now, which says to your brain subconsciously, you're not willing to invest in yourself to go about it in the way that sets you up for success. And why would you feel like you can't go about it in a way that sets you up for success? It means you feel like you're not worthy.
Right.
And you've got to shortcut it.
Right.
And we have that.
Buy your way in.
Yeah, we have that everywhere. If you think about it, debt, student loan debt, all of these things are around to help us feel, air quotes, like we are successful and we'll be happy when in reality, if we put towards the progress and go about it slower, maybe it's less convenient, but in the end, it empowers you versus taking away that power and being in the chains of debt. So that's my opinions on it.
I forget what country it was, but there was a country that there's a index about, like, happiness index.
Yeah.
I don't think it was Nepal, but it was.
The Netherlands are quite happy.
I'm thinking of, I think it was an Asian country, but not Nepal, but close, somewhere in that region where people live fairly simple lives and they are fairly disconnected from the world. They're not isolationists or anything like that, but they, year after year, they seem to be winning this, based on research. They're like, they just live simple lives. And the things that you mentioned, like comparison doesn't exist over there. People are not keeping up with the Joneses and all of that, and adding stress to their lives.
And there's an ego that comes with it too. Like, we all want to feel successful. We all want to show that we're happy. And now we have platforms to do that. Right? But in many cases, it's to do that at what cost versus to be authentic. And I'm not saying people aren't authentic online, but what I'm saying is that sometimes we feel like we're not authentic and we need to prove ourselves and we want to shortcut that journey. Whereas one of my biggest influences, going back to the money thing, is Dave Ramsey. I know a lot of people don't agree with his way. I'm not a math person. I'm a momentum person. So I love his concepts because it's all about that momentum, the snowball method. But I personally take great pride in the fact that my husband and I are credit card debt free, and it took time. It took the discipline. It took the small habits. It took measuring the progress and building the momentum. And we're so much happier for it. But I think a huge component of that is I've built that evidence on the positive side that I can do these things. I have determined I am capable. And I feel capable, I feel qualified. And that goes back to feeling like you're not qualified, you're not good enough. If I'm doing these steps and I feel capable, I will start to feel qualified. And that means I can invest in myself and do it the way that's the right way for me, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can have that confidence in who I am, and all of that can proceed to happiness.
I love it. It's like a chain of self-reinforcing links, where one thing leads to another thing, which leads you to another thing, and empowers you. It's like a chain link of empowerment. Like, oh yeah, now I know I can do this, and like with that knowledge and that kind of feeling as well, you're like enabled to do other things, because like, look, we had this debt, we paid it off, we set up a schedule, we did it. What a sense of accomplishment. And now I know if I can do that, what else can I do? And apply the same kind of methodology.
And that's the progression versus the stagnation.
Mm-hmm.
But I think going back to the epidemic, there's a lot of stagnation. There's a lot of emotional buffering.
And I want to talk about stagnation and growth, but but go on. Sorry, I just needed to say that out loud so I would remember and cross my fingers.
Okay, stagnation, progression. But there's a lot of stagnation. There's so much emotional buffering. We don't want to deal with our emotions. And when we don't deal with our emotions, they start to build up inside of us. And then there's so much comparison because it's so easily accessible. I'm not down on social media, but it's easily it's easily acceptable to look at other people and compare, but it's also easily accessible to do that. And so it takes that, is this really serving me?
It's just like almost everything else in life. There has to be that balance. You can pretty much almost everything that exists, you can take it to an extreme and it will be negative in some way. Mm-hmm. And the same go in the other direction. It's like we can't be just happy without some level of unhappiness, because then you wouldn't know what happiness is. If you would be just 100% time happy, well, how would you know?
Exactly.
How would you know that you're happy? But let's go back to I wanted to talk about growth, stagnation and growth.
Yeah.
What I believe, and then I want to pick your brain what you think about it. I believe that this outbreak of social anxiety, depression that we have, and is in part because people are they are not focusing on like personal growth. They are not growing in terms of pursuing something that keeps them happy, makes them happy, and makes them develop. It's kind of like gaming. You know, like when you're playing a game, and there is this state called flow, and flow describes a place when you're playing this game, and it's not too difficult, but challenging, and not too not difficult, so it would be boring, right? You're in this sweet spot. You're pushing yourself. You're going forward. You're learning. You're failing ton, right? You get killed or whatever the game. You lose, but you do it again, and you're progressing, right? And that feeling of that flow, of that moving forward against a challenge, but still being challenged and not bored, is that sweet spot. And I think that we, as a society, we're just missing out on a lot of that. People are not doing something that allows them to grow. They have their work, they go home, they feel so stressed at work, so they come home, they don't focus on that growth, they focus on numbing themselves. So binge watching, binge eating, binge whatever, and so that leads to more negative stuff, right? Because then whatever
they never worked through
side effect, they never worked through it, and then rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
And so the other day I had James Lyman as one of my guests, and he works on, this is just going to be a really quick side note over here. He works on a technology that allows 3D printing houses with concrete, which is going to, in the end, is going to make cheaper housing faster and all of that. So people will be able to actually purchase a house and pay it off faster, because it's going to be a third of the cost. Okay. because what's happening right now, we're so indentured in the system where we're buying a big house and then we got to pay it off for 15 or 30 years, and we feel like, okay, well, I have to work and work and work and work. We feel like trapped. That's one feeling. The second thing with what he's doing is allowing automation, taking away stuff that people do. And I know this may sound like negative from a perspective of like, well, we need jobs, I need to be busy. What I'm hoping for, and my little solution for how we as a society globally can become happier, is let's automate everything that we possibly can. Let's shift our perspective of what work week should be, have more fun, more time to pursue growth, personal growth. And like a magic wand, it's going to take away anxieties and depression, in my humble opinion, because people will be doing exactly what we just said, which is growing. Do something. Learn how to paint. Enable yourself by and then pat yourself on the back. Like, look, I didn't know how to paint. Now I've learned how to paint. What else can I do?
Yeah.
You know? But that growth seems to be the underlying common denominator among all of this. What do you think about that?
I completely agree. And if I can share a personal story. So I had a time after I'd started my happiness journey, but I was still kind of in the weeds. I had a time, my husband actually had to leave for about a year and a half. So I was alone, and it was just me, and we now have two dogs, but at the time we had one. So it was myself and my dog, who, side note, I always make this joke, but it's really true. I have two soulmates in this world. One is my husband, and the other is this dog. Like, I love this dog.
I'm with you.
They're such wonderful creatures.
We and I don't want to interrupt, but like we had a German Shepherd, and just all dogs go to heaven except maybe Cujo, but maybe he's in heaven too. I don't know. It's like they're just wonderful animals. They're just pure love, like in a neat bundle.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. So it was me and this dog, and for 9 months out of the year and a half, I would go to work. I have like a hair on my face. I would go to work, and I would come home, and I would turn on the TV, and I would eat, and are you still watching? Yes. Are you still watching? Yes. And I'd go to bed at like midnight, wake up wake up the next day, go to work, and do it again. And that was the tactical piece of it. But emotionally, what I was feeling, it started out with this loneliness because I was alone, and I didn't want to feel that way. Stuff at work was going fine, so it wasn't anything there, but it was really just this loneliness, and who am I when I'm alone and not surrounded by at least my husband, and feeling loved and cared for and all those components. And that loneliness was not something I had ever felt before. And I didn't want to feel it. And automatically I turned to the TV, and became an addiction. And also, because that wasn't enough, I needed to numb it more, I would eat. So I'd eat for 6 hours straight a night. Oh, here's some edamame. And I wish they were all that healthy, but have you ever had the cans of frosting?
No, I couldn't.
I can. They sell for 10 for 10 sometimes.
Oh my.
And I mean, it was to the point where, I'd buy the 10 for 10 deal, and after 10 days, I'd be getting another set.
Wow.
I'd go through a can of frosting a day, just eating and watching TV. And if that wasn't enough, I'd be scrolling on my phone, looking at social media. Anything I could do to not feel this loneliness. And I do have a tipping point here where I just didn't want to focus on it. And after those 9 months, I took my dog to the vet. Now, I have an Australian Shepherd. So they're medium-sized dogs. They're supposed to be 45 to 50 pounds. So we go to the vet puts them on the scale like they always do. And they're like, whoa, he's 70 pounds. Now, another thing about Australian Shepherds is they're quite athletic. Like, they're a very active, very athletic, very intelligent dog.
Right.
They're my go-to breed. I love them. And I didn't realize that my emotional overeating and stagnation had completely affected my soulmate, right? I love this dog. And I'm responsible for him, and he's 20 pounds overweight. 70-pound dog who's supposed to be 45 to 50 pounds. Like, that's just insane.
Right.
And borderline neglect. And I hate to say that because I'm a good dog owner, but that's the space I was in. And it was that tipping point for me that I realized we needed to make some changes, because he was feeling all of my emotional stuff and behaving in a similar way, like eating all the stuff as I'm eating all the stuff.
Hopefully he wasn't eating your frosting.
No, but at the time, he'd never had that problem before. Like, there's some dogs who you can't leave the food out continuously. Never had that problem with him. I started to have that problem with him, and I didn't notice because I'd never had it before. And I was so focused on me, but not focusing on me, that I ruined him, essentially. So we started to do things to help me grow. But what could we do together? So we started doing agility, which is an obstacle course thing for dogs. Really fun. And we started competing in it. And we started to learn and do all these pieces and being social, because it's a class, and competitions and entire groups of these people that do this. And it really started to like transform and get me out of my shell. And that happened in October. And so November, I decided to instigate No Netflix November. And here's the thing. We want to talk about you come home and you buffer and you don't want to deal with your emotions. If you take out the buffer, you have to deal with your emotions. You have to find some way to grow and to cultivate a life that's enjoyable, instead of ignoring it and investing in TV show characters' lives.
Right.
And so that
living vicariously through all these characters created for us.
Exactly. Like, there's a reason why we are sad at the end of a series and we miss the characters. It's because we have invested our lives into them versus investing in our own lives. So when I look at like the epidemic of things, I've been there. And the guilt, not only on like what I did to my dog, who we'll get to that in a second, but even before that, I would come home, do nothing but eat and watch TV and scroll through my phone, go to bed late, wake up, go to work, go through the same thing. And that cycle continued because I'd feel guilty for not being productive. And I didn't want to feel that guilt on top of the loneliness. So what would I do? I would buffer it. And that vicious cycle would continue. And I think there's so many people who are in that cycle. And luckily, I had some wherewithal for my own happiness journey up to that point, but then also some wherewithal that clicked when I went to the vet with my dog. So a year later, husband's back, feeling good, but also have maintained the agility and really have a sense of self and knowing what I need to be happy, which is growth. Go to the vet, different vet technician, puts my dog on the scale, looks at the numbers, and is like, well, that can't be right.
There's a clerical error over here.
Yeah, and he's like, it says he was 70 pounds last year. He's down to 45. And I was like, that's not a lie. That's not a typo. That was really where we're at. And the vet was like, that's impossible. I've never seen a dog come back from that. Now, fun little side note, he lost 20 pounds. I lost 20 pounds. So like we lost this, like literally I went down 20 pounds, he went down 20 pounds, and we lost this weight together. And I think that goes to really show, to make a tangent-esque connection here. Look at the rates of obesity and the rates of unhappiness, and overeating is an emotional buffering technique, and people are more unhappy than they've ever been before. Going back to every single thing is connected. So
yeah, so in a way your dog saved you.
Yeah.
From that downward spiral that you were in, you know?
Absolutely.
And they are phenomenal souls, whether emotional support, you know, there's nothing like when a dog just comes over you, puts her like,
head, yeah.
And you're like, oh, it's like you can't be unhappy in that moment. It's like, that's like, I think that's the only single example that I can come up with of an instantaneous transformation when you have that kind of love come in and just like, it's like a big warm hug.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I highly recommend pets for happiness.
Yeah.
Granted, like that's a small piece. That's that joy in the moment happiness. You can't get your happiness from other people or other things. You have to do it yourself. But it's a good component.
It's a great component to kind of start you off on that. And caring for, like you said, caring for your dog made you do things that, and also that was the element that showcased like, oh my God, like external thing, like, oh my gosh, what's happening to me is happening to this dog. A dog is overeating because I'm overeating. And so that was an excellent sort of like external tool that helped you kind of like see the circumstance that you were in.
Yeah. But also the hope is that by sharing that story, somebody else doesn't need that external. They can watch this here or hear this here and be like, I spend 6 hours a day watching TV.
Right. And what
am I doing to myself?
Yeah. And that's the idea behind this podcast, to meet interesting people like yourself, learn from them and from their experiences, and then sharing that. And I think that's a shortcut for, segueing through something that's, I don't need to experience that. I'm learning based on your experience, and then I can apply that and not go through that whole thing, hopefully.
Yeah.
And then just emerge on the other side. Where do you see, given everything that's happening to us as a society, the social media, the entertainment, the soon to be anything that you want at any time dropped by your friendly Amazon drone to your doorstep, where do you see as a society in a year or 2 or 5, given the trends that are, where we're heading? I mean, you have your work cut out forever with what you do.
Well, and everybody wants to be happy. I think that it's really interesting. Up until this point of automation and easy access, we've had to focus on getting those things. And the difference is, and there's definitely a rise in this, and I've seen it in my industry and just even online and things like that. But I'm going to backtrack a little. Let's go back 30 years. Let's go back 5 years. You have to go to the grocery store. You have to go in the aisles, get what you need, or you're paying your roommate to go get it, or whatever it is, right? But there was some action that had to be taken to facilitate I need food, which is a core need. There's a core need of society, social, and you had to go out and meet people and put forth this action. So, there's a convenience factor that has come into place now. And I think we could potentially use the language of seeing that as a negative thing. There's this epidemic and everybody's hermits and they're in their houses. And I'm not saying you're saying that, but there is this idea of what does the future look like where we don't interact with each other face to face? And what does the future look like when we don't have to go to the grocery store? We don't have your dry cleaning and your laundry, they pick it up and they drop it off. And your groceries, they drop it off. Somebody can take your garbage out, a robot, whatever it is. And we look at that like people will get lazier. Here's my alternative to that. All of those things that we had to work so hard for before are at our fingertips, which is going to force us to work on ourselves. I don't have to worry about all those other things anymore. Those needs are met. The only thing left is to focus on me, which is hard, which is why we have the epidemic that we currently have and the buffering and all of that. But there is a movement happening. There is a shift. There's a shift with content like this. There's a shift with social media having tools and resources that's easily accessible for people, things like my podcast that you can tune into every day and get something new that you may or may want to apply and see how it impacts your life. There is so much information and resources available that you can take action and focus on yourself. And for those who don't, there's the buffering, and that's the society that's like, oh, we're all hermits and everything's easily accessible. We don't have to do anything. But there's this whole other side, this whole other movement that is coming where people are having a better opportunity to connect to themselves and connect to their higher purpose, their higher power, whatever it is, to better themselves because they don't have to worry about and set aside time for all the rest. So I actually think that it could be a really positive thing, and I think that that movement is happening. And I think that there are tools and resources continuing to be developed by individuals like me, individuals like you, to help people when they're ready to step into that. So I actually see it as a positive thing. And like the hard worker in me that doesn't like electric cars and I like the sound of a roaring motor and like hard work is everything, that me is like, oh, it's going to be apocalyptic and we won't ever see each other. But the lighter side of me goes, actually, I can put that hard work and I can put that roar of that engine into my own life. And I can be so much better for it. And I can impact and touch so many other people through these connection pieces that we never had before.
How come we're not teaching what you're doing at schools? This should be like part of like human curriculum 101. You know, how to be happy in a sense of, I mean, kids are perfectly happy. Look at them. They don't need external guidance and they naturally do it. And then, I don't know what it is, society, work, what have you, grinds us to this, you know, this almost automaton that's just doing this. And if you don't have any of the processes embedded in you to follow, to keep yourself, you know, in check and keep yourself happy, or at least measure that progress where you are at, then that's why we have all these issues right now, you know, the anxiety and depression. So it almost feels like this should be part of like curriculum. It should be like, all right, you got to get your college credit or high school credit or whatever. You also need to have, you know, happiness 101.
Well, and I think it comes down to, and there are some schools who are instigating these kind of things. I don't remember where it's at. There's one elementary school where they, instead, an alternative to detention was meditation. Funny enough, because I'm like, meditation doesn't help me. But kids who were acting out, instead of putting them and punishing them for acting out, they gave them the space to work through what they needed to work through and to be able to come back and participate. And they found that saw way higher success rates in the kids not acting out again or misbehaving or not being acceptable to the rules that have been set out. So there's things like that that are starting to come into play. I think you also have private schools and tutors and things like that who are starting to really see that there's a need for this. We also have a look at the education system is set up for a one-size-fits-all. And as we're seeing more and more, it's becoming much more, and maybe it's not more prevalent, but it's more diagnosed or more aware because of all the access to information, is that people have different learning styles. And we have people who are on what we're calling the spectrum. And that's not necessarily a weakness or a wrong thing. It's how can we work with you and communicate with you to help you.
Yeah, help you and get the maximal potential that you have, you know, help you realize the maximum potential that you have.
Exactly. Instead of being a one-size-fits-all model.
This is what I love about podcasts and the sharing of knowledge that's happening between, you know, people like you and I and others who are listening to this. It's exposure to different perspectives. Yeah. I'm so sick, and we don't watch TV at all. Like we don't even have a cable. I think we do have it, but because it's part of a home association fee. But like we don't watch TV. We don't watch news. It's just depressing. It's just this one. It's A or B and nothing in between. It's my camp. It's your camp. It's my team. It's your team. It's Republicans. It's Democrats. It's these kind of like just separation into these separate camps versus trying to kind of see like what kind of unifies things together.
Yeah.
And so with respect to like education, you know, what I see is we do have this one size fits all. It's like the grade system. Like you go into next grade. Everybody has to go. Oh, not everybody can. Let's lower our standards so that everybody can go. No child left behind. And I'm going to sound at a risk of sounding like a broken record because I often talk about this with other guests because I am so passionate about it. Because it is true. Our kids are our future, and the next generations will be as good to us as we are to them.
Yeah. And
what I see is we have these old models of schooling that I understand they had to be the way they had to be, you know, maybe in 18th, 19th century. But now with the technology and the access to information and being able to present the information the way people can ingest better, like the modalities of learning that you've mentioned, right? The auditory, the visual, tactile, there's like no excuse to not have like a curriculum that has different varieties of how even like make assessments so that kids can learn asynchronously, meaning that not everybody will learn at the same pace.
Yep.
Okay. And 2, how can we serve the knowledge or the education that caters straight to you, personalized, individualized, so that you understand it better? Is it that you need more graphs, 3D graphics, or just text, or maybe audio? Maybe you need to listen to this. Yep. That's a fascinating topic, and I could go down that rabbit hole quite easily. But yeah, it fits into this whole paradigm as well. And I feel like if we're going to have more time, we're going to be able to, we're going to be able to spend more time on the right things, on the growth.
Yeah.
Provided that someone takes us, provided that we get that exposure to go into that growth journey, instead of, oh, I have extra time now, so that means that instead of watching only 4 hours of Netflix, I can watch 8 hours of Netflix, right? So pick your poison, so to speak. But I think that with awareness, which is what's happening, and that's what I love about the ability of sharing this information, this is going to impact someone, guaranteed. Someone's going to watch this, and it's going to change their perspective. It's going to change their life, because it's going to make them think.
Yeah. And I think on the educational scale, we're already kind of seeing it, but you're going to have a lot more people with that free time decide to do homeschool. Because then I can customize for my children. I can say, okay, this child A and child B, they learn differently and they're in different grades, and it's not connecting with the teacher. And then you also have bullying and all these things that lead to this low self-worth, and it's just easier that I can teach them, and we move in that direction, right? So I think you're going to see a big movement for homeschool in that space for the people who are going to use that time to not only grow themselves, but their children. I think that, and I do not want to go in a political category at all, or territory, but if we're looking at that gap financially, the people who are over that 75,000 will have the mental capacity to be able to dedicate to that. And I don't mean capacity in like an intelligence. I mean in freedom of space to think about, how do I want my kids to be taught?
Thank you for that.
Yes. I don't mean like intellectual capacity at all. Everybody can be smart in their own ways. But what I mean is the freedom, mental space to go, I don't have to worry about all of this stuff and getting my bills paid and all of that. I can focus on my kids, and the automation is helping me have the time. Yeah. So now you have the mental and the financial and the time to focus in that direction. And it's education. Like if you don't have children, I don't have children, but if you don't have children, that education is for yourself, right? Taking that direction, that growth. But if you look at that gap that's occurring financially, those that are living paycheck to paycheck or are struggling to have those ends meet, there is no space to even be thinking about that way. And both parents, if you're in a coupled relationship, both parents are working to pay the bills. So the children have to go to public school, and you're stuck with what you get. And then we have high suicide rates. We have poor self-esteem that lead to high suicide rates. We have children who aren't being taught in the way that they need to be taught, and they're just getting pushed through the system, or it's getting dumbed down for the kids who are at that level and they're like bored. So then they act out and they turn to other things to not motivate, but to connect with them, to engage them. And so you have it on both ends of the scale, where the children who need the help are getting left behind but pushed through because we don't have the time, and the parents don't have the time, the emotional effort or energy, because they're struggling to keep everybody going, and they can't even focus on their own happiness, let alone the children. So you have that side of the scale, and then the kids who are getting it through that learning style are bored out of their mind because we're going so slow, so they turn to other things, and then we have the addictions and all of that. And it's just this cycle that I think could be adjusted in a better way to facilitate a happier society.
And I'm just, bursting with wanting to ask you this cliche and silly question. So how do we break the cycle and fix it all? But as we talked about, it's a complex system of systems that it's not a one pill, it's not a one solution. It's a whole bunch of solutions all over the place that feed into this mechanism, it feed into this cycle that goes. So we need to literally, I think that's why we are where we are, because it is very complex and it takes multiple different experts in different fields and different people and different perspectives. All of that has to feed into it because it's just so complex. It's not going to be just solved by teachers. It's not going to be solved by politicians. It's not going to be solved by any individual group of people. It's going to be, everybody really has to come to the table and have this, listen guys, this shit just ain't working anymore. We need to really rethink this whole thing, re-engineer this whole thing, and everything else on the table right now, so let's really throw all the ideas, and I think that would be a great discussion. That would be such a wonderful discussion. That would be a great, make a conference out of it, to make a big round table and have, and have this just massive discussion. I don't know how that would work out technically, but it seems like that's what we need in order to reshape our society, one little step at a time, in all these different parts of this huge mechanism that we're in.
I totally agree, with one
exception.
And it's not really an exception, but that can feel so overwhelming. And as an individual and as a parent, you can ask yourself, what can I do? And I present this idea to you and to everyone that I have seen with my clients that I mentor. Because again, a lot of them have met that checklist. So a lot of them have children, because I'll be happy when I have kids. I'll, all these pieces, I'll feel fulfilled, whatever it is. And oftentimes, the ability to focus and grow yourself will set you up to better support your children. And
explain that.
If you have the tools and you're showing this is what it can look like that mom is happy or dad is happy, and you have the tools and you're working that and you have the habits and the actions, when your kids are struggling, A, you're an example for what is actually possible. B, they're more likely to come to you with their issues because you're open, you're not in your own head dealing with your own stuff, and the anger that comes and the lashing out that comes because you don't want to deal with their emotions, you can't deal with your emotions, right? There's all those other components. That stuff is solidified out, that they're more likely to come to you, you're more likely to have better relationships, better communications, and then couple that with your own self-education, and you can then teach your children the tools on how to manage these things. And slowly, child by child, the ones that are most important to you, you can change and adjust their lives and set them up for a better future while you're doing it for yourself. And that happening will have an impact on the kid on a one-to-one level. And those are the long-term play here. Those are the kids, when they're putting their kids in school, that will change the school system automatically, because those are the kids who become teachers and change that. Those are the people who become administrators, who become politicians, whatever it is. And that has been put in place, that this is the way that is successful, and they will put that in place in the complex systems. But it starts with you loving yourself and you putting the time and the effort in yourself so that you can help other people, which is the whole complex issue of people think that self-help is selfish, and if you're focusing on yourself, you're setting boundaries, it's selfish and unacceptable. But the truth of it is, by becoming whole and happy in who you are, it ripples effects out to every person that you touch and connect with. And I think that ripple effect will eventually hit our complex systems in a way that they can be changed and not feel so overwhelming.
You're absolutely right. It's like a distributed system of conquering a problem. Instead of building one tool to solve a problem, you build a bunch of other tools, smaller tools, and tackle it from all directions at the same time. And that's kind of like what it's yeah. And you're absolutely correct on that. I mean, maybe there's even a fusion solution of both, having a public discourse, and those are happening in pockets here and there, right? I mean, we're not reinventing something new. People are talking about issues. We know that we have them. It just that feels that it's just so overwhelming that no single group can actually, we have this idea of like, oh, government should just fix it. Government go and create more jobs because people need something to do.
Government needs its own restructuring. Yeah, they can't focus on this too. Yeah.
And it's just, that's a wrong attitude. It's and in a way maybe we've been, we're becoming like a nanny state where the government is taking care of like everything, where there's more entitlements that we expect from the government, so that we don't take that personal responsibility, and so it's like a vicious circle over here. But I agree. I think it's starting on all levels, and those kids growing into teachers and politicians and just change makers. They will change the future. And what we're going to do, I know it may sound cliche, but it really is true. Like what we're going to put into those kids, what we're going to teach them, how we're going to condition them and make them work in this world is what the world is going to look like in the future. So if you're going to, neglect and what have you, that's what's going to be happening later on. It's going to come back as a feedback of our work.
And I would say at a bare minimum, and I'm not here to tell anybody how to parent, but at a bare minimum, teaching your kids that their emotions are okay is huge. Because then your emotions are so deeply connected to your thoughts, as we know through the CLEAR model, and your thoughts are who you are. And so when you tell a child that they can't feel angry or they can't feel sad or they can't cry, or that they have to accept somebody's apology because they gave it, you don't have to. You can feel angry about it and still eventually forgive that person. You don't have to solve it right now and shove it down, or you don't have to, nope. In my case, girls should be quiet and female, right? Feminine and not heard kind of thing. Children should be seen and not heard. Like there's so many of these phrases and things, and boys, you can't show emotion other than anger. You show sadness, stop crying, toughen up.
Thank you.
Right?
Yeah.
That's telling you that how you feel as a child, if you toughen up, don't cry, what you feel is not valid. And if what you feel is not valid, then you're not valid.
Yeah, you can't be authentic. You can't be you.
Exactly. And so I think that has led to a lot of this as well. So if you can handle your emotions, and not handle, but manage, and be able to identify and explore and sit in them for a minute, or understand why you're feeling that way, and then be able to move, again, back to the other side of the spectrum, and then you can teach your children that, I think that is an amazing foundational step that will eventually, long-term play, but change those systems.
Wow. So we talked about happiness. We talked about anger. We talked about how to change the world. Habits, right?
Dogs.
One habit at a time. Absolutely. Pets, dogs, community I mean, that's your family. Your dog, your pet is part of your family. And man, there's a joke over there that I forget which comedian said. I think it was Bill Burr, who was talking about like they got a dog and his wife was like becoming jealous. You love this dog more than I do. Like, well, honey, if I come home at 3 a.m. and you're angry with me, that dog is still happy to see me. We're just wagging the tail and it's like, yeah, I love you, man. You're awesome. So
it's true though.
So that kind of unconditional love is just contagious. I'm not quite sure how to conclude this because I feel like we could talk for like another 2 or 3 hours with, and so I'd love to invite you again to do another episode. I mean, I had a blast talking, and I think we just kind of scratched the surface. And
yeah.
And what would be some of the things that you would want to convey to the audience, whoever's watching this? Any nuggets of wisdom that you want to part with, or you want to maybe their top 3 things, or something for takeaway for people out of this long conversation in terms of happiness, where to start, maybe other than see you and check out your website, Happiness Abound, to see and learn more. And what would you want to tell the audience in terms of happiness?
So we haven't really touched this, so maybe this is a teaser for next time. But I've established this formula that I think can lead to happiness or achieving any goal. And that is that your identity plus your vision plus your mindset plus leadership equals happiness. The idea being that once you know who you are, and so your identity, who are you? How do you function in the world? How do you work through emotions? How do you do all of these things? Your identity is the first step. That moves you to your vision. Who do you want to be? What do you want your life to look like? What does happiness mean to you? What is that vision? Then mindset is working through all the emotional barriers, the mindset and beliefs that you need to break through, the things like I'm not good enough, or I'm not going to make enough money, or if I make a lot of money, my parents will disown me because they'll be mad that I made more money than them, or whatever these beliefs are, right? Then you're working on your mindset to achieve that vision while working within the framework of who you are, like your templates in the world. And then the last piece is leadership, which is for lack of a better word, with every positive connotation instead of the negative, that's that discipline to be able to lead your own life and take those steps and those actions to really put it all into place and to do it consistently to build that progress. So although we didn't quite touch on like that formula, I think that that's what I would like to leave everyone with here, is because we did touch on it a little bit with the sense of the 4 tendencies. What are your templates? How do you deal with inner and outer expectations? What are your learning modules? That's who you are. That's the identity. And there's so much more to it, of course. Then there's the vision. That's a little bit of the declarations we talked about. Who do I want to be, and what actions do I need to take to do that when a certain situation could trigger me the other way, or it's neutral and I can make those decisions? That's that vision. The mindset is breaking down those beliefs and looking at things like the buffering and going, okay, why don't I want to deal with this? What mindset do I have where I don't even want to acknowledge loneliness, right? And how do I shift that mindset? And how do I break those barriers? And then if I start having success or whatever it is, and I start going after my dreams, what beliefs are holding me back? What mindsets do I need to break through so I can get there? And we've talked about that a little bit. And then the last one is that leadership and that discipline, which is that daily goals and tracking your progress. So that I would say, like, utilize that formula, and we've touched on a little bit pieces of it, but that formula alone is fantastic for happiness. The second thing, I'm going to cycle back to, I think 40 minutes ago, where you said the ability to look at how you've progressed and track those successes. And if we could just do that, we would build that evidence much faster, and we wouldn't diminish our successes and push them aside.
Right.
We're much more likely to remember our negatives than our positives. So I would recommend one of 2 methods. You can do both. I do both. That is, I have a success book. So I have a binder. It's super ugly. It's just a normal like binder, and it has a printed out that says Taylor Success Book in orange. Like, it's nothing fancy. And I got those leaflets that you can put paper in. And every time I take something off of my vision board, or I have a really good goal, or someone at work gives me a thank you note and says, you're like the best boss ever, or whatever it is, I do pictures, I do a date, I do a brief description, or I put the card in, or that stuff, and I put it in this book. And I'll tell you, on the days where I'm like, I just want a donut or whatever it is, and I feel like crap, and I feel like maybe I'm not good at this, whatever it may be, I can go back to that success book and really acknowledge that, like, actually, I'm kind of a badass, right? And remember that. So I highly recommend that. The second success structure is, on a weekly basis, get a notebook and keep it specifically for this, but draw a grid. And where did you win? What did you learn? And what are the opportunities? And what were and this is, I have to be very careful on this, because I don't want people to focus on their losses, but it's wins, losses, learnings, and opportunities. And so where did you win? And list everything in your life that you won that week. Oh, I did a great job parenting my children, or I didn't miss a workout this week. Whatever those wins are. What did you learn? I learned I can do hard things. On those losses, what did you learn? I learned that if I make this adjustment, it's worth testing, and I think that will work out for me. Based on my identity, I think if I make this adjustment, this will work. And so using those small amount of losses, don't harp on them, to inform your learnings. And then that informs the opportunities of, okay, what am I going to do this next week? And using both of those, or even one or the other of those, can really help you build that evidence and lean into that formula. So I would say, again, you had said that, and I was like, oh, I definitely want to talk about success books and that tracking. But I would say those 2 things, that formula and tracking your successes, are a huge point on that, because it can really help you be happier. And tracking and building that evidence for yourself, to go back to the whole reason I am here, and the external reason I am here, I should say, and the tagline of my podcast, the mission of my business, the name of my business, all of that culminates together to remind individuals that they are capable of happiness abound.
I think there's at least like dozen episodes in where you just every component of the equation that you came up with is an episode, and it's on its own.
100%.
And I love how you're going back to what worked for you and what works for many people, including myself, which is structured and also steps to follow. So specific tasks, specific things, not vagueness, because it's all vague in our heads. But if we put it down, just the same as we talked about journaling, when you have to write it down, that chaos has to coalesce into something that you're going to put down and write down on paper. And then it becomes more real to you and more tangible and something they can go back to. So I totally subscribe to that. In fact, I started a vision board. I have to fill it up and take the time to put those pieces on it, and then work and set up that binder that you mentioned, like with those successes and things that you can quickly just go back. Yeah. You know, a lot of times I think like even family photo albums are sort of like that, where you have those happy moments and then you go back and we look at them like,
those
wow,
vacations.
Right? Yeah. Vacations, and look at that, like, you know, we did this when we did that, and look how happy, like, those are like those external cues that help us kind of go back in memory into those special places and times when we were happy and that was captured. And so it's a great tool. So I love that. Oh my goodness. If you need a soundboard, if you need someone to bounce your ideas as you kind of like and share things, I would love for you to be a regular guest on this show, and we could talk.
Sure.
It's phenomenal. You're a fountain of knowledge, and I love your story. I love the journey that you went through, and we're going to peel some of the onions in future episodes on multiple topics that we kind of planted the seeds on right now.
Yes, please. I would be honored and delighted, and this has been amazing. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you. For more information, you guys can check out our website and of course Taylor's website, happinessabound.com. I am so happy and so stoked that you made it over here, that we made this podcast. I'm hoping that this is going to help out. Oh, wait a second. I'm looking at the wrong camera. How about now? There you go. And so hopefully you got a lot out of this. This was oh my goodness, I don't even know how long this podcast is, but it was a lot of information that was packed in over here. So I hope you're going to listen and re-listen to it and unpack it, and you're going to find those golden nuggets for you to follow. I love what she did with breaking things apart, making it approachable versus this overwhelming big problem that we have to deal with to be happy. And on that note, I'm going to end the show. Thank you for watching. If you made it all the way over here, visit us again and rewatch this, and we're going to be doing more of these shows. Thank you so much.